They just
Oh, there's one I had about there's one I had about voter IDs. Like, so for example, how obviously in this country currently as it stands, voter IDs is a stupid ass idea. However, though, I had who was it? It was like, why was Twitch something something? He's in the Discord. It was basically talking about the Canadian system and about how effectively how they have a lot of these like extra standards of how they engage with their political system and their voter registration, to where effectively it looks like in that instance it would be a viable way of having voter ID. And so effectively the question is if the U.S. was to adopt more of these like Canadian-esque types of laws and systems regarding voting, would you be more open to a voter ID policy being implemented?
Okay, I can try to tackle that. It for me, it's not just the fact that there's a voter ID that's a problem for me. It's a problem where they specifically choose what counts as an ID and what does not, and how this has been used historically and is being used today to target demographics and things like that. Like conceptually, if we had a different system, a more federal kind of system where the the federal government could kind of control uh, different state laws on voting and things like that, then okay, maybe I would be more open to a voter ID mandate of some sort. But as it exists today, it's just not something I'd be interested in. So as we get closer to a better system, sure, why not? But as of right now, no.
Yeah, I'd be for like using IDs for voter IDs. However, the problem I have with it is like I'll be okay with it if we can make it free. One, if you're going to charge something to charge for exercising your right to vote, that's wrong. So like having to pay for an ID so you can exercise your right to vote is now kind of gatekeeping it, right? You're putting a block in place, and I think that would be unconstitutional at that point, because you're inhibiting somebody's right to vote because you're requiring an ID that costs money. So that could be an inhibitor for say like poor people, homeless people, and stuff like that. Also, it needs to be made easier. Or not limit it to just the DMV. Make it so if you're just getting an ID, not a driver's license, that you have another option to go to. So you're not like just, there's not just massive clogged up lines at the DMV, because we all know the DMV is fucking horse shit. And then, if it was free and accessible, like I don't care, because it would offer everybody a chance to get it without any like monetary constraint that they might not be able to afford, or make other places available for them to get their IDs that might be closer to their home, or offer services to be able to do that online.
Okay.
I just wanted to jump in and say I'm gonna bounce, and y'all should probably just let Prime go to sleep, man. This man's tired and he's been streaming for a while. He was talking earlier about how sleepy he is.
No.
I
Okay.
gotta keep working, dude.
Oh, you gotta keep working. All right, gotcha. All right, well, I'm gonna bounce, but I appreciate you letting me be on a invite panel, and I did like Samantha's take on that. I'll watch the VOD later, see where you guys end up. See ya.
Yeah,
Didn't you already get your level 5 hype train for Prime already for tonight?
Huh?
Didn't you already get your level 5 train for tonight?
I didn't get out. No.
Oh, was it level 3?
What the fuck, watching people? What the fuck is wrong with you not giving Prime a level 5? You fucking cock-ass little cucks.
So, Amanda, if you want to say anything.
Yeah, so I just want to say that like voter ID the barriers don't stop just at cost. There are lots of communities in which being able to get to a place in which you can get an ID is far away.
Did you
Outside
miss
of
my sentence where I said either make it available online or open up to more places that are not just the DMV, so people have closer access to be able to get to them? Thank you.
I did miss that. Sorry, I was logging.
No, I got you. That's another big thing, because not everybody has a car or a mode of transportation. Yep. So, and the fact that everybody can do anything online, we were able to do everything online over the DMV during the course of COVID. I don't know why they can't keep that system in play.
Yeah, so there's actually parts in rural Iowa that they do not have access to internet at all. Broadband is a huge issue in many places across the country. But I do agree that a little bit, but well, I'd say a little more than a little bit. But so it's not just a cost thing. There's the transportation thing. There's getting time off work, which I understand Samantha's points does take away a lot of those factors. But in order to get an ID, you also have to have other documentation in order to get that ID. That documentation is also costly. It takes time to get. And many people, especially in lower economic statuses, don't have access to those other forms of documentation in order to get IDs. There's children that age out of the foster system who can't even get their birth certificates. So them getting IDs is extremely difficult. Along with that, there's just a lot of research behind who voter IDs disenfranchise, and it's mostly, Black, Indigenous people of color. And I think with that, I think we should really take this. So let me back up a second. Voter fraud is the main argument in regards to having IDs. Voter fraud happens very, very rarely, and voter fraud can be fixed after votes are counted and stuff like that. What we can't fix, though, is if people are denied the right to vote, we can't go back and give them that right after the election, right? And then another thing is that lost my other point. So go on, but I'm sure I'll come back with it. But if you could put me in rotation 3 or 4 down, so that'd be cool.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay. Oh yeah. So I guess, man, we don't really have anyone that's oh well, voter fraud is 100% here. We need hyperchore or some shit. But no, yeah. So a lot of this, so some of the core main parts about the Canadian system are, one is that it's all federally. Is that the federal government does have laws and implements it on the whole scale. So basically, they have effectively one set of rules, and this applies for the federal elections. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's also for all the state as well. So basically, the federal government is telling states, hey, this is how you're gonna fucking do it, even within your own interstate election. Right? The second part was offering at least, while in some of the states we have, for example, if you're in Texas, there's only 7 forms of valid ID that will be accepted. In Canada, there's 40 plus different forms of ID that you can utilize that are accepted. And then also the third part is that at various stages, whenever you're going through the system, for example, if you ever move, if you get your driver's license, if you're going to college and you're getting your shifting your address that way, or applying for a student loan or anything, at that point, you get the option basically, a little from my understanding of how it's described, is a little notification hey, do you want to register to vote? Then you can get yourself on the rolls. And then fifthly, the rolls never get I have to look at to confirm it, but the voter rolls do not get purged on a short-term basis. Canadians don't get removed from the voter rolls unless they directly request it. And so
okay, I don't even know why this is a fucking question, because there's no actual fucking voter fraud happening. So I don't know why we're even having a discussion on should we implement voter IDs. This is stupid. It's fucking dumb. I hate you, Smug.
We had a conversation about voter ID before. We had a conversation.
Voter fraud. It requires at least one person to be.
Yeah, but rednecks on a road trip not happening.
Smug. You believe in voter fraud?
Well, I believe it happens, but at a minimum scale. Yeah, I'm in agreement with everyone else here, but I thought there'd at least be one fucking contrarian here.
Do you believe it's that necessary that we need voter ID?
So I think at the point where our system is the Canadian one, potentially we could still. I believe that we could. I wouldn't necessarily be against voter ID at that point, potentially, because I think at that point, is where you could effectively implement voter ID to where it would actually mitigate voter fraud. Even though we can concede that's a small amount, that it could be mitigated further, but that's only under those conditions that it has that we are effectively that Canadian system. But and obviously that's part of that discussion.
But we have
even in
sorry.
Canada, even in Canada in 2015 when they passed the Fair Elections Act, there was they were afraid that the passing of that act would restrict people from being eligible voters from being able to vote. The same reason why we have a fear of voter IDs in America, which we a lot of people think is unconstitutional because it prevents people to vote, especially if you don't have access to those means to get that voter ID, even online. Even having it online, a lot of people don't have access to internet, even in America. We learned this especially because even when we went full remote, and even people in schools couldn't access education because they didn't have access to proper internet. So the fact that we think we're going to be able to have just voter IDs and then getting something like a birth certificate. Everybody doesn't have a birth certificate because everybody wasn't born in a hospital, and sometimes those administrations change, so those documents gets lost. The social security card. What else? Any of those required documents aren't getting. Everybody doesn't have access to that, so it becomes a barrier to eligible voters who once were able to vote will no longer be able to vote, which is why it will become unconstitutional.
Which is why one of the particular points that I made in particular with this other system was, your discussion is about IDs. Well, in this other system, there's at least 40 acceptable means of getting yourself registered to vote, as opposed to but I'd agree with you, within the current US system, where in some states there's only 7 or in some there's 10, and it's a fucking clusterfuck depending where you live in your location. And in some instances, depending on what county you're in, I would agree with you. Yeah, within the current status, yes.
What
we're talking about within that case system where you have 40 of these options.
Well, it's different in Canada because they don't operate like us. They have
that's
Smug. Can I ask? Are you against?
Should we not?
Amanda, let Amanda in.
Yeah, Smug. Are you against mail-in voting? Because you don't have to have an ID for mail-in voting. So I feel like even that, the argument to have an ID is just totally thrown out with the fact that we allow mail-in voting.
No, I'm for it because for mail-in voting, if I'm not mistaken, you when you assign for mail-in voting, you still effectively have to first register, which, from my understanding, it still requires ID and verification of your address, if I'm not mistaken, and that counts as that check right there.
But so then what's the point of the ID? Because that check is right there. You're exactly right, and that's the whole point.
Well, because I think the distinction there is the difference. It'd be that difference between mail-in voting and then people who actually attend the polls. Now, I guess if you wanted to counter, I guess it'd be why not just have an all mail-in voting system and sure, if that would be the
hell yeah.
Just having nationwide mail-in voting, sure, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Colorado does that, right? And they have a pretty high success or a high turnout rate for voting. But I mean, if you're for mail-in voting and think that we can implement a system like the Canadians have with voter ID, I guess I just don't see what the point is of implementing this entirely new system when IDs are not necessary to vote in mail. Do you get what I'm saying? It just seems really I can't think of the word.
Yes. An address is required to vote in mail.
Yeah.
Especially if you're if you're enlisted, if you're in the army.
It's not like you're just giving an address though. But again though, from my understanding of that voting system, you still have to show a valid form of ID and your address to get registered in the first place though. If I understand.
No, I literally logged onto a website. I just wrote down a fucking address and I typed it all into this thing, and I got registered to vote.
Yep. So there's lots of states
I didn't have to show any ID.
Yep. There's lots of states like Samantha just said where it's super sad. I mean, most states actually. I could walk up to someone with a card and get just their information and then go turn it in for them. So yeah, and then they're issued pretty much a voter ID number. And so then what happens with mail-in voting, and this just happened recently in Iowa, was that when they sent out the cards for you to, so they're called ABR chases, absentee ballot request forms. And when you go after ABRs, you used to be able just to fill in your first, last name, address, and maybe a phone number or email just in case they needed to correct something. But your voter ID was not required to be on there. Now in Iowa, they switched that up in order. So basically to just disenfranchise. And I mean, this was said out loud by some of the Republican Party. They were just not wanting Democrats to be able to vote more because I don't know if everyone knows, but in my field, everybody knows that Democrats vote most by mail and Republicans vote most on election day. And so they're not only trying to implement laws that target, mostly Black, indigenous people of color, but they're also specifically targeting Democratic voters and the way in which we vote. So they made it so that we had to know our own voter ID. And we also shortened our mail-in voting period from 90 days to 45 days. There was a whole bunch of lawsuits this year. It was absolutely crazy. But I just think that anything that like limits people's ability to vote is unconstitutional. And I think that voter fraud is so slim that like any of these arguments are just shit.
What the heck in chat? Over a certain age, people shouldn't vote. What the heck? Don't you know that
Dementia arguments.
most elderly people who vote you're like condemning the Democratic? What's going on? Who would say
No,
something?
it got worse. It got worse. You weren't here when we had LRC debating that there should be no fucking minimum voting age. We should let fucking babies vote.
We should let kids. I got to get out of here, dog. Y'all starting to get nuts. Prime. You know how you're talking about excess? Sometimes excess work, man. This is when the loons start coming out. The freaks are out at night, dog. They're saying stuff in chat. Mods. Help. Oh no, he is a mod.
Like, do you not think that there's a certain like age or like that where like people should not vote?
No, because we're not ageist here. If I heard Prime correctly, there's plenty of people who above their 70s, in their 70s and 80s, who are still, if not have full onus over their own minds and still can function like the rest
do
of
that
us.
Because we're letting people over the age of 60 run for fucking president. So shut the fuck up with that garbage. Come on.
Exactly.
What kind of nonsense? What is
everybody who lives within the United States, who is governed by the government of the United States, who is subject to its laws, should have the right to vote.
Except
every
children,
single person.
No, that's
even
a
children.
Stupid take. That's a fucking stupid take.
It's not a stupid take.
No,
It's a stupid
let
take.
children vote. What's going on?
No,
Are these the
that's a
people from
terrible
last
idea.
conversation?
Well, Andy, how are you distinguishing
Every single person.
distinguishing like a child from like an
You're gonna have presidential candidates out there like, if you vote for me, I'm gonna give everybody cotton candy.
And a Fortnite
I was on
Fortnite
a daily
account.
panel and we discussed this actually, and it was really interesting because Kat brought up some really good studies in other countries where when they dropped the voting age to 16 and how well informed these 16-year-olds were, because those that ended up being engaged in the process were extremely engaged in the process. So they actually were
saying 16. Viv said children.
Oh,
there's a difference.
16 is a child, is it not?
16 is a teenager. There's a difference between a child and a teenager.
Yeah, we get it. Hebophilia and ephebophilia. Yeah, good one. Look.
Oh God, I'm not an ANCAP. Jesus Christ, do I look like Vosh? No.
They're both children, right? They're both below the age.
Oh boy, sure.
Yeah, but there's a cognitive difference between a 3-year-old and a 16-year-old.
Yeah, but 3-year-olds ain't going to be fucking voting, are they?
You said everyone who is
No.
Are you
Wick,
in the UK?
Wick, holy shit,
let's
Wick.
not pile on.
Wick, what she said was that everyone should have the ability to vote, but she didn't say everyone would vote, right? Like, would a 5-year-old actually vote?
We recognize rights, right?
So
like,
where would you draw the
right
line?
to vote
And
not
what
the
age
ability
would you
to actually
set,
do it?
Vivian? What age would you set to be the voting age?
The ability at which you can feasibly understand like what is being written on the piece of paper that you're ticking.
But here's the thing,
How
right?
you
No,
measure that
27.
in
Got
any
it.
way.
27 years old.
that's the problem. Setting the standard, it makes there's a lot of people don't understand what the fuck they're voting for, and they're like in their 30s.
She
Well,
didn't
no,
ask
I
that.
mean,
She didn't ask
able to
that.
read and
Okay, so
understand
able to
what the
She's
read.
words
talking about like
mean.
8-year-olds.
So the ability to read would be your cutoff, correct?
What? I
The
mean,
ability to read?
no, it's not the ability to read. It's the ability to understand what is written on the ballot paper,
Wouldn't that?
right? So, because other people
How is
might
that
not have the
different from
ability to read
real
and could have
comprehension? I
somebody
mean,
else read it, because other people could not have the ability to read, somebody with serious learning difficulties or something, right? Who might be fucking 30, 40 years old, but could have it explained to somebody else and have somebody else fill out the ballot paper for them, right? I think understanding is different from being able to like actually read the
Fair.
words written on the
That's
page.
fair.
Okay, cool.
I
Yeah,
understand what you're saying now.
But then wouldn't their
Again,
parents vote for them? Like, I mean,
yeah,
wouldn't that
just in
open up?
practice, this just won't work.
Well,
yeah. Like, quite. Wait, how often? Kids often vote against their parents. What are you talking about?
No,
But not
I don't want. I don't
5-year-olds.
have a situation.
What about women? What about because this is something.
Women.
Oh, well, listen to what I'm going to say before you say anything, right? Listen to what I'm
We're
going to
going there.
say. Well, no,
I agree,
no.
Prime. They shouldn't be able to vote.
No, thank you. I'm glad we can finally get that done. No, listen to what I'm saying. It's that we know that women tend to become like more conservative, like when like they get married, right? And part of it is just like listening to their husband, right? Like this is like a known thing that you know, women will take the lead of will allow their husband to take the lead on these things. Like, okay, I'll vote for whatever you're going to vote for, right? This is the thing that
We
happens.
also have doorkeepers where they won't let you know, phone bankers or people that knock on their doors speak to their wives.
Yeah,
And stuff
exactly.
like that. Yeah.
So I'm saying that like at the same time, right? Like if you're saying that it's a problem that children will vote the way their parents will do that, well, wives, fully grown women might do that too, and men might do the same thing. You know, like follow the lead of their wife. It's a possibility. I don't know if there's any studies on that.
We can recognize that there's like a degree of coercive control that adults have over children that like doesn't necessarily exist elsewhere, but like I would say it exists to the same level in multiple kinds of relationships, just as Prime pointed out. And this doesn't mean that we shouldn't allow those people to vote. I think if you're subject to the laws of a nation, you should be able to vote on those laws. Otherwise, it's authoritarianism.
But kids aren't exactly
You know what?
subject to a
This
lot of
what you just said open doors to more. It's more like what you're saying, allowing children to. Not all children are the same, especially in different
Not just
social
children,
economic.
convicted felons, immigrants working in your country.
But we're not talking about them. We're talking about
No,
age.
she's talking about everything. She's talking about all of
Everything?
them. She
So let birds
she
vote.
wants.
Let birds
if
vote.
No.
If
Birds
you are
can
within
talk,
if you are
They
within the
can press
borders
the
of the
button with their
country,
feet. Mice brain function on our
if
level.
you are if you are with
Monkeys can
you're
do
saying
sign
right now
language.
is
They live here
different from
too.
everything else
Oh
during
my
the borders.
God.
Let them vote too, dog. You know this foolishness.
No,
I gotta.
that's not what she
Listen,
said.
Wait,
Let the
okay.
animals vote.
If you want me to restrict it, if you want me to restrict it,
Ghosts vote. that
holy
didn't
fuck! Shut up,
die.
Ozzy. Ozzy,
No,
shut up. If
like,
you want me
this
to
is
restrict,
dumb, Vivian. This
Ozzy,
is
no,
dumb.
you're dumb. Okay, you're doing the straw man
You're
again
dumb.
because you
I'm
don't
not
actually
ad
know
homing.
what a
Why are
straw
you
man
ad
is.
homing?
Go
I'm
ahead.
not.
Go ahead. Say your
I'm
point.
not ad
Say your
homing.
point.
You don't know what an ad hom or a straw man is, Azzy. One day I'll explain these things to you.
Say your point.
Then it's fine, okay? We can chuck out your ridiculous straw man, okay? And I can just clarify and say that I mean everyone with personhood, okay? Every person, right? Every person who is able to, who is subject to the laws of the nation, right? Whether they are within its borders or without its borders, in fact, right? Because you can have like people who are just overseas for a short while or whatever, right? If you're subject to the laws of the nation, you should be able to vote on those laws. That's what democracy fucking means, right? Like, I'm advocating for as much democracy as possible, and anyone who's arguing to the other side of me, right, is arguing for a more authoritarian system.
So I love how
Man.
hold on. I love how Azzy will just like he doesn't even notice he's muted. He'll just keep talking. It's like he really doesn't know. Has no idea the entire time. He was just like, I'm going to talk over her and just keep going. Doesn't matter. Okay.
1984.
I'm going to unmute you, but I'm going to let Dan go and then Whick and Amanda.
Yeah, this is why I'm not like an anarchist. Like, I think this is like I understand the point of like everyone have the right at least get more democracy as possible, but really, kids are going to vote for what their parents are like. I don't want to have a situation where like the Duggar family, the 19 kids and
I
counting,
know the Duggars.
yeah, go around and have more like political power over in like Pennsylvania than most other people because they have way more children than anyone else.
Yeah,
It's
I don't care how many arrows you have in your fucking quiver, all right? Like, it is true that parents can exert certain amounts of coercive control over their children. That's why education is so fucking important, right? Like, we would recognize this in other areas of society where we're like, hey, kids probably shouldn't believe that, like, medication is going to kill them, or they shouldn't wear a mask to school, or it's okay to fucking beat up the black kid, right? We recognize that kids have dumb beliefs put on them by their parents, but that doesn't mean that we go in and start fucking, like, restricting their autonomy in ridiculous fucking ways, right?
So,
I don't
so,
There's
see
more-
why-
so consider
Okay,
my
if I can
parents.
try.
Hold on, consider my parents, right? My parents, they know I know a lot more about politics than they do, and they're like,
Mhm.
tell us who to vote for. Should they not be able to vote? Like, I effectively have 3 votes. Should they not be able to vote? Should they take their rights away? Because they're like, they defer to me.
What I was gonna
If I may
touch
take a
on
stab
is,
at
like,
this.
so for many of these arguments that are being made as to why like smaller kids shouldn't vote, like how is that not the same? How can you not apply that same argumentation to older people as they get fucking older and lose their autonomy?
Older
Well, let
people,
me-
disabled people.
Wick,
Yeah.
Like,
give it
they
a
get
try. Wick.
dementia and Alzheimer's.
Okay, let me.
These forms
This
of,
is
like, this
okay. This
illness.
is the main argument. It's not even the coercion argument here. So when Vivian talks about setting an age of where people can understand what is being spoken to them or what they're reading, what is written basically on the ballot of the box they're ticking. So the problem with that is we recognize that children advance cognitively at different levels. If you take any 3-8-year-olds, they're going to be different levels of comprehension, different levels of cognitive ability, et cetera, et cetera. In order for a system like that to work, you'd have to have a competency test of some sort. You'd have to be able to demonstrate in some way, shape, or form that the child, let's be clear in our wording here, that the child is able to comprehend what is being said or what is being read by them. So that's the issue. The nation's history of literacy tests and comprehension tests has been pretty bad. It's been used as a tool to oppress rather than to get more democracy. So that is my main argument against this whole idea, is that one of the reasons like a 16-year-old setting an age limit is because at 16 or 18, most people could reasonably assume to have a certain level of competence. Now, this isn't the case across the board, but in general, we can reasonably assume that an 18-year-old can comprehend what is on what the words are, whether they're being spoken to them or whether they're reading them. When we get into letting anyone who could pass this test vote, the whole fact of a test just makes me very uncomfortable.
That's what they were advocating for, a test, which is even worse because that's gonna advocate for more differences.
No one said that.
No, because like especially children children have more access to this could become a socioeconomic disparity. This become people who have any communities where there's high levels of illiteracy, any gaps in ability to that's a prevalent problem right now in America, that a lot of under a lot of low income communities, their literacy levels are dropping, their English rates are dropping. So the fact that we're going to allow children who can't read or write functionally, or they're way below grade level by the time they reach 4th grade, to now allow them to go and start to vote, they're going to be heavily influenced. You would find that people are going to be less, they're just going to ask what their parents, dad, mom, dad, who should I vote for? Because they don't know. They're going to be more
But let's be real, that's what most people do anyway. Like, most people have no idea what the fuck they're voting on.
Yeah.
There was
that's the problem we have
making
now.
a great point, Azzy. You were making a great point until you went into that kind of area.
Like, who end up going to like family care facilities or people like who like have dementia.
The issue is they won't be able to
Like,
access the
basic
information.
ass consistency check on you that you seem to refuse to fucking answer. Like just like the last fucking topic, this is like just basic consistency.
I didn't even hear your question. What's the question?
I know you don't because you just fucking talk. You're a fucking debate bro talker.
Okay, but Smug, address my point then. Like,
Okay.
if we open it up, not to an age limit, but to a competency limit, there has to be some sort of test given, right? There would have to.
That
No,
doesn't
that's
that
just
doesn't have
stupid.
to be
That
a
is
test.
just stupid because that is now
be a
going into a disability argument. That is going now into like that is just stupid. That's just completely stupid. And I'm sorry, but there's some like data. I can't remember it. Kat posted it, and we were talking about it on this other panel I was on, where there was some distinctions between 12 and 16 and why these countries went with 16 as opposed to 12. And they looked into it. I don't have the data, but I totally base Viv's take on, you know, if you're within the borders, then you should definitely have the right to vote. Now, I think that coming down to an age thing is a little bit different, and that's because of so many things that can go wrong in regards to that. As I basically just feel like it's giving parents double votes. Like, to be quite honest, that's how it feels.
This is exactly what's
So
going to
what's
happen.
I mean,
going to
it just
happen
give
with
it.
this
You could argue that it would just give
more better
carers extra
socioeconomic
votes.
conditions will be able to vote sooner because they are given more access to education, that they develop better, they have better food,
Wait, what the
and they
fuck
just
are you
develop better.
talking
So what's going
about?
to happen? Just shut the fuck up and listen, and maybe you'll understand and learn something for
No,
once,
because
Viv.
you keep
So
talking
please,
about
let me
stupid fucking
educate you. Let me
competency test.
educate you.
Let
because
me
this is what
educate you.
happens.
Fuck you condescending
Yeah, I
prick.
can't educate. Your ignorance is
Get
fucking
out of
invincible.
here.
You can win
I'm sorry,
win
you
an
just went
argument
on a half
against a
hour
smart
fucking
person, but it's
straw man.
impossible to win an argument as a dumb
Ah.
fuck like you, Vivian. So listen a bit, maybe learn, and
Fuck
shut the
you.
fuck up
You
while I
just
finish.
went on a half hour fucking rant about
My God, I
Vivian,
can't
Oh
even
my
say
we want
God.
babies.
fucking
Oh
know
my
you
Can we have
God.
some moderation here?
advocated
Wick.
for.
Can we have some moderation
The
so I can
love
make
and
my
fear,
point?
the love. Shut up! Oh my God! Yes, the love affair between Wick and Viv continues on. It's a beautiful thing. Wick, continue on. Finish your point, please. Thank you.
So again, if we have if the limit is not age and we take a competency level, then you have to test for that. And in testing for that, we know that socioeconomic conditions influence the development of a child. We know this. And so those in better socioeconomic conditions will advance faster, will be better able to have access to these education levels that the poor community will not. So what it will de facto do is it will give voting rights earlier to some groups than others. And that is what you're advocating for right now, Vivian.
You done?
Blank. That's what I said.
Here's the competency test, okay? And competency test is your ability to fill out a fucking ballot, possibly even with somebody's help. There you go. There's the fucking competency test.
Did you just hear that nonsense? With somebody's help, somebody could be telling you to fill in answers without your onus. If you can't read or write on your own,
exactly the same for any carer, any person with like severe learning disabilities. Like you're.
So why don't you just answer that question, Azzy? Like, why don't you think people with severe learning disabilities, people with Alzheimer's or dementia, why don't you think they should have the right to vote restricted?
Why don't I think people who have Alzheimer's shouldn't? Because
learning
Alzheimer's
disabilities,
doesn't.
yada yada yada.
Learning
They
disabilities
aren't allowed to
doesn't.
vote, actually.
They're
because
not
they have
allowed to vote.
fiduciaries, and fiduciaries aren't allowed to vote for people with disabilities. So
Yeah, which is also disgusting.
Okay, so to be clear, as you agree that they should not be allowed to vote.
Well,
People with
if
learning
you-
disabilities,
if-
with dementia, with Alzheimer's, severe mental health issues or whatever, they should not be allowed to vote.
People who don't have the full onus of their own mental, who can't think or act for
So
themselves.
you are advocating for the competency test now, not me.
No, we're saying that it's already used in school system. Is already used in order to determine whether somebody has an IEP or who's going to be an ICT student. You do already use those competency tests. Like the UDL.
And if they fail them, they can't. And if they fail them, they can't vote, right?
can I just say that I'm going to log
This is
off here, but
disgusting,
I'm
bro.
going to agree now with Viv to allow all kids the right to vote, so that
Oh
now
my
all
God.
single parents have the ability to vote more, so that we can have better progressive
They
policies.
deserve it. I don't necessarily think, right? I think a lot of kids would vote the way that their parents would vote, right? But I think a lot of people vote the way their community votes anyway, right? The way people around them vote. I think everybody is subject to this kind of like social coercion, and I don't think there's a reason to stop them from being able to vote. I think a significant amount of children would vote in another direction as well, because
we work against that. We work against that every single day to make sure that you're not just uncritically voting, that you're not just allowing people to
exactly.
Well, so then
we should absolutely have civics courses and teach children about, like, you know, what they're voting for.
We do.
We don't.
I think
no, we don't.
Yes, we do.
I don't remember any in.
It's not.
like,
It's
primary
not.
school
It's
talking
not a
about the
constant.
candidates.
It's not constancy amongst. But it's not. It's not constancy amongst every single
People
education.
don't. No. Let's not even give that impression. People leaving high school have no fucking clue how the government works, right? Don't know don't know the branches of the government, right? Don't know the branches. Don't know like what the executive is responsible for. They don't know any of that stuff, right? So let's not give that false impression.
That's state standards. That's Common Core curriculum. You're taught that. Just because you leave not knowing it, that's your own. That is your own issue. But it also is an issue of the teacher. If they didn't teach Common Core standards, that is fault of them. Yes, there's fault on both sides, but it is still taught.
Okay.
How long has Common Core been a thing?
It's been a few years. Time. It's been a few years, yeah. Dooby, you want to say something?
Well, so a couple things. So first of all, I think this is really funny. I think the reality is what Amanda and Vivian are counting on is that the more people with undeveloped brains voting, the more likely their policy propositions are going to be able to pass. So that's just like a quick side
exactly.
remark, right?
Yeah. No,
but secondly,
let the monkeys vote.
No, but I think they have a point. I think you guys are being a little inconsistent, right? So I think we need to come to like some kind of firm position from everybody about whether or not democracy for democracy's sake is a good thing, right? Whether or not democracy is always good, because that's what Vivian is saying. If you're existing in the country, you're subject to its laws, you should have a say in how the country functions. So and it seems like you guys disagree with that. You think that there's some kind of line, right, at which someone gets access to that privilege.
A lot of authoritarians in this chat.
No, because the presence of social welfare is the fact that people can't always take care of themselves, so there's the onus of allowing government and other people to advocate for them.
I want Dooby to make his point, because I know where he's going to go with this. He hasn't done this in months, but I've missed this. Go ahead, Dooby.
Oh my god. Well, okay. What I was going to say is that I agree that people with dementia, Alzheimer's, there are a lot of people, right, that have very serious mental health problems through no fault of their own, that I think should probably not be voting on the way that the country functions, right? I don't think children should be able to vote. Obviously, I don't think it makes sense to have people who barely develop like object permanence voting on like matters of like national security and fucking rent control and tax policy. It doesn't make any sense to have these people vote on that. But I also think that given that most people in this country have no fucking clue how the government runs, how the things that they're voting on affect the day-to-day lives of not just for themselves but everybody around them, right? I think that we should have a competency test. I think that we should restrict voting heavily, right? Not tomorrow, but I think over time this is something that should be striven for, as people are given more access to education, to everything they need to educate themselves on policy and what their vote means, right? I think we should make civics classes available to middle schoolers and high schoolers, obviously. But I don't think the answer here is like just fucking giving people free reign to vote across the board when they hit fucking 3 years old and their mommy can help them fill out a form. That seems really that seems like the reason you do that is because you think democracy is good, just for its own sake.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, why? Why is that good?
Why? Because I don't think that people ought to have authority over other people without them having a fucking say in it. What you're advocating for is basically the same as what fucking slavery was. There's a hierarchy of people. I'm better than you. I get to decide how you are ruled. It's bollocks. So you guys can either be on Dooby's side and actually be fucking consistent and agree
But
that
you
there needs to
contradict
be some kind
yourself.
of competency test, or you can be on my side and say that there doesn't need to be a competency test and that everybody who is able should be able to vote in the laws that govern them.
Vivian,
Then
you already
how do you decide
contradicted
who's
yourself.
able?
No, she contradicted herself. She contradicted herself because she already said people already vote. They're already heavily influenced by the factors around them, the people around them.
Yeah, so they are.
So they're not voting for themselves. They're allowing other people to dictate their vote for them. So
What?
it doesn't. So you're here advocating
Wait.
against.
There's a difference
here.
between somebody being
No.
coerced and somebody having their right to vote taken away entirely, right? You might be coerced in society to like choose different things, right?
Not necessarily.
You might choose to go left rather than right because of the societal factors, but that doesn't mean that we go, well, as he can't decide whether to go left or right, therefore we're going to determine that he has to go right. Right?
Okay, so
Like,
let's
fuck that
discuss
shit.
why. Let's discuss why the voting age in
No.
the United States is 18. It's because at 18 you are expected to perform all the functions that a citizen performs. Before that, there are some functions that you are not expected to do, and that is the justification we use. We used to have a voting law age of 21. We lowered that to 18 because at 18 you could be drafted. So the logic was, which I agree with, is that if you were expected to go to war for your country, you should be able to have a say in what is done for that country. Now, when we talk about who is able to vote and making some kind of test, which you would need if that is the criteria,
Right.
if the criteria is simply whoever is able to understand and comprehend, you would need some sort of test
No.
in that case. And I'm entirely against that because historically, in every case, it is
Oh
the
my
use of
god,
oppressed
why are you the
minorities.
straw man
This is a
again?
fucking ignorance of history. It's uneducated, and frankly, I
Okay, but
expect
wait.
better.
It's
But
you're
wait, hold
just
on, wait,
you're setting
Vivian,
up a
please.
straw man and
I
calling
am
it
not.
a
This is
fucking
what you
ignorant
said.
position.
You are dancing
Wait, hold on,
around,
wait.
trying to do these
Arguing
mental
for a
gymnastics.
fucking.
These
I'm
trying to
not
mental
arguing for a
gymnastics to get around
competency
of
test,
addressing
Rick.
the fucking
There,
point.
I'm
there's
not
no, there's. Wait, hold
arguing
on,
for a
Vivian.
competency test. The
Yeah,
competency test is can you fill out a form?
yeah,
Right?
Wick, you are
That's it.
you aren't
You're the
representing
one
Vivian's
arguing for a
position correctly.
competency test because
Yeah,
you're
Vivian.
arguing
Not
that
true at
people.
all.
You're arguing
Wait,
that
Wick.
people. Well, maybe not you, but Azzy arguing that people with dementia shouldn't be able to vote. People with severe learning disabilities
We
shouldn't be able to
already
vote.
don't let them vote.
I
Wait,
don't
one
care
second.
about what we already. If you support this, then you're supporting some kind of competency test for voting. Okay. Just because we
Yeah, so
already
can I?
have a competency test for voting, that doesn't mean by supporting
No,
it,
there's
you're
a
not
difference
supporting the
between
competency
having a
test.
disability. There's a difference between having a disability and regular competency of people who are still able-bodied.
What's a
There's a big
disability?
difference.
Hey,
Azzy?
So
my
just
phone's
like
gonna die here soon.
just
But
like
I
you made the
right now, literally. Okay, so I was using the wrong word with fiduciary. It's actually guardianship. So thousands of Americans every year are stripped their right to vote once they're under guardianship, and I find that not
That's
saying that I
right.
agree or disagree with it. I just find the word guardianship, strangely tied in because isn't that what parents are? Do you get where I'm going with that? Like,
Well, the reality is that some people cannot take care of themselves. Some people can't really
yeah,
make decisions for themselves. So they do need guardians. I don't think there's anything wrong with the word.
yeah. So
yeah, but
just like
my point is like, aren't parents typically guardians? So then I guess that further complicates this whole thing. And if my phone dies, I'm sorry, guys.
no problem.
Wait, can I say
No,
something
it
real quick?
doesn't.
I'm just trying to make it as Vivian. If you're here trying to say there's a difference between coercion and people being forced to not enact their rights in form of like a competency test, then you can't. What's the difference between somebody? There's a difference between somebody being disabled
Because
and not
one
being able
is
to make their own
gradiated.
decisions.
Because one is gradiated and one is absolute, right? We can
no,
do
no,
away with absolutes
no.
and attempt to mitigate. What? Sorry, no. If I say you can't do something, right, that is very different from me from somebody using a coercive influence to persuade you to not do something, right? Like these are two different things, and we recognize
So
that.
then,
Like,
if somebody can't do something, take care of themselves.
we recognize that like coercion is
the
a
fanatic.
scale,
Okay.
right? And well, I'm sorry, buddy. You've been getting fucking upset because people have tried to interrupt you all night, and as soon as I start talking, you have a go.
Upset.
So, So we recognize that there are like levels of coercion, right? Where it gets to the point where it's like almost impossible for you to make any decision other than you do. Like somebody has a fucking gun to your head or whatever, right? And says, do this thing or I'll shoot you. You're probably going to do that thing. That's really, really heavy coercion, right? But it's like saying somebody literally cannot make this choice to do a thing is different from coercion.
Well, if somebody can't make there's somebody who's physically disabled and can't think for themselves or can't remember the last thing they did this morning or where their car keys are or who their family are or who they them if they can't go out and vote, why are we trying to advocate and allow them to vote if you're so adamant for your position? Why are you so now against people who are disabled who can't vote for themselves? Literally, like Dooby explained. What's the problem?
I don't understand what you're saying, Ezzy. I'm not against
because you're as plebeian as everybody else here. You're just as dumb as the rest of us.
That's not true. Hold on, that's not.
This is just atoms.
I really hate this.
I didn't understand you because you used a whole bunch of like whatever. Look, I'm not against those people voting, Ezzy. You are, but I'm not.
Yeah, I really hate that you guys are making me defend Vivian here. You're both strawmanning her like repeatedly.
How?
Well, she said nothing about a competency test.
She did.
Right?
She literally had the ability to fill out.
No, she didn't. No, she
said
didn't.
this. You can go back in the VOD. If you can fill out a form,
Wait, that's not a competency test.
Yes, it is.
She said. She said. If you have the ability to fill out the form.
Okay, no, hold on. Let me stop.
With somebody's help.
Vivian, please. Let me. Please. This is extremely bad faith because Whick, if that's the standard that you're using, we have a competency test. No, stop. This is standard. No, this is what you've invented.
So
no,
I can
listen,
only
stop.
engage with her.
Stop talking.
Stop talking. On the words she used.
Hold on.
Because
please.
you got some cringe ass.
Let me explain this. Okay. So I think that's extremely bad faith because if that is your standard for a competency test, then we currently have a competency test, which is being age 18 or whatever the fuck, right? So if that's the case, and you're saying that children shouldn't be able to vote, you're also for competency test currently, and you've been arguing against it this entire time.
Being able to
Whick, unless your standard for who should be able to vote is like being a living human being in the country, then you shouldn't be against competency tests.
Yeah, being a living human being who is 18. That's not competency. It's not the ability to do anything. It is the ability to survive 18 years and to act.
Okay, so let me ask you a question.
Competency is ridiculous.
It's like saying, stop.
No, I want let Dooby go. Go, Dooby, give it a try, please.
So Whick, okay, so you're saying 18 years old, and that's it?
Look, I would be up for an argument for 16 or another age, but the age is the important part.
That's the only thing.
If you bring it to anything else, even the ability to fill out a form, it opens the doors to really bad.
No, it doesn't.
Wait, hold on. No, stop.
We have all history to show
I know
this
it is.
is true.
This is
the ignorance of how these tests have been used historically.
Oh my God! Shut up! Oh no! Stop! Everyone, stop! Thank you. Hold on. I want Dooby to give it a shot. Go ahead, Dooby, please.
Yeah, to be clear, I'm speaking for me. I'm trying to explain that he has competency tests. So, Whick, you're telling me that you think a brain dead person who's 16 years old, 18 years old, whatever it is, laying in a hospital bed, should have the ability to vote if they're literally brain dead.
That's what Vivian said.
No, stop. Let him go. Let Dooby try.
I'm asking Whick, right? Whick said they needed the ability to fill out the form, right? So I'm sorry, Vivian said they needed the ability to fill the form, even with the help of other person. Yeah. So Whick, I'm asking you, do you think that person is totally brain dead in a hospital bed, but 18 years old, should have the ability to vote legally?
Well, no, of course not.
Okay,
they wouldn't vote. It's not a competency
Why? Because they'd be incompetent.
No, that's the same. That's the
kind
same.
of hyperbole.
That's the same.
Yeah, holy shit! Viv, stop! Viv, stop, please! For fuck's sakes, let him go.
So again, that's not the same thing as what Viv is calling for here. Viv is saying that someone as young as 8 or 5 or 3 should have this
I understand.
ability to vote if they are able to physically fill out a form. Now the problem with
With
that,
help. With help.
even with help, the problem with that is, again, socioeconomic conditions help us develop at different rates, our levels of education. Yes, filling out a form involves certain tasks and certain skills that cognitively and developmentally a child learns at different rates based on the access they have to resources. We know this. This is scientific. This is data. You can sigh at me all you want, but this is what the data shows. It's very like fucking weird.
No, it's not. It's not that weird. I'm trying to make you understand that you also have a competency test. What you just told us is that you think a brain dead 18-year-old would be they would no stop. They would not have the they would not have the competency.
They would
to
never
vote,
go
right?
to.
They would not have the competency required to vote
If
your
they
system.
could express a desire to want to vote.
So you also have a competency test. Like, I don't understand
These
why
are
you're so
different
against this
levels.
now. Vivian is the only one
Different
here
levels
who
of
functionally
act-
does
you
not
can't ignore
who
nuance.
functionally
I
does not have
can
competency.
really easily clear this up. Okay,
Dooby, there's a difference.
We understand there's a difference between the legal ability to vote and the physical ability to actually do the act. When I said the competency test is the ability to actually go out and vote, right? Even with somebody's help, that is a hard restriction that is placed on us by fucking reality. That brain dead person doesn't have the physical ability to like go out and vote, even with somebody's help, right? They just don't. Okay, whereas like a child might have the physical ability to actually go out and vote. Anybody who has the ability to go out and vote, right, who is subject to the laws of the country, should be able to. That if you want to call that a competency test, okay, fine, but then so is whether or not you're fucking brain dead in a bed. And I think that if you're brain dead in a I think if you're brain dead in a bed, right, you should have the legal ability to vote, but obviously you're never going to exercise it because you can't.
Dan, what were you going to say?
I was going to do a small question to Azzy. If Coco the gorilla was still alive, would you allow that gorilla to vote in a American style election?
Apparently, if Vivian's way is allowed, Coco the giant or Coco the gorilla, if she had the ability to speak our language, the ability to press the button with help.
You should ask that to Vivian, not to Azzy. Azzy is against this.
Ask Azzy.
Azzy is against.
I'm against that.
Yeah.
So ask Vivian.
Then like Coco the gorilla, like considered one of the smartest gorillas to ever lived, was very much heavily educated in many different tasks and all that. What do you think that gorilla should be allowed to vote in like the Georgia elections?
What I said earlier, right, was like anybody with personhood, right? That's when Azzy started bringing up the thing about monkeys or whatever. Like, if we get to a point at which we recognize like monkeys to have personhood, then sure, of course they should fucking vote. Why shouldn't they?
Oh my god, dog!
That's what I want to bring.
Monkeys vote, dog.
That's what I want to bring.
Why not? I just
Smug. Let the monkeys vote. Smug. Let the monkeys vote.
Wait 1 second.
Let
So I
the
think
parrots vote.
Do monkeys have legal person? Do monkeys have legal
You
personhood?
understand how legal personhood operates? Like, at the point where you get to legal personhood, like, you are in effect, like, there really isn't a justifiable means to, like, discriminate that individual or that being if the thing's being granted fucking personhood.
So let the monkeys work. Let the monkeys pay taxes. Maybe if we allow their animals to work the jobs that we don't, maybe we'll have the job gap would be.
Then sure.
If they have personhood, then sure.
God, who are you to say God will not evolve some other species of monkey to have a greater frontal cortex? A greater
I hate you so much right now.
Let the dolphins have the capability. Let whales vote. let birds vote. Let octopuses can press buttons, dog.
It sounded like you said because your voice kept cutting out. It sounded like you said let the pussies vote, and I said yeah, absolutely.
Let the octopi vote because they're each part of their body is a brain cell, and they're able to press button. They can think. They can think. They can communicate. No, I'm not. No,
If they're people,
monkeys can use sign language just like people. They can communicate with us. They have the onus to communicate.
I mean, that's not necessarily the case. That remains to be proven.
Now the monkeys can vote, and if the monkeys can work on all fours, now the gorillas can work with us in the job place and Amazon. We don't have to worry about robots anymore. Just let the gorillas and the monkeys work, dog.
If they have personhood,
no, it's not even about personhood because
because that was actually
Vivian.
What did I say, Azzy? Other than if they have personhood,
as long as they have help. If I can get my monkey help to fill out
they
that
have
paper,
personhood. How many times do I have to say it, Azzy? Every time it's the same stupid story.
They can speak with us. They can eat our food.
I think we can.
Whoa! Don't. Sure.
Apparently,
this Sorry, when I said whoa, I actually meant shut the fuck up. That's what I meant. Sorry, I apologize. I got my words mixed up. I meant shut the fuck up. Thank you. Great. All right. So, like holy shit. Yeah, they literally can't hear you when this happens, right? When you're all piling on, like the audience has no idea what the fuck you're saying. So like you're just wasting your breath at this point. Okay. So great. Oh god. Look. Let's
just run away.
Can I respond after being screamed at?
Okay, fine. And as you don't open your fucking mouth, man, I don't want to have to meet you. Don't open your mouth. Let her talk, right? Let her get it out.
I said personhood was the standard, right? And I said if we get to a point where we consider monkeys or fucking gorillas or whatever to have personhood, then yeah, of course they should vote. Right? That makes perfect fucking sense to me. I don't think we're at that point yet. I don't think that the evidence is there to suggest that the apes deserve legal personhood. Okay? Like, and you say about like monkeys being able to understand sign language and all that sort of shit. Like, I went through all the like Coco the gorilla like sign language stuff a little while ago. I think this is a separate conversation, to be honest. Like, do apes deserve personhood? Do they have like similar cognitive abilities to humans?
Yeah.
But I don't think the evidence is there to like currently prove that they do. But if it does come up, I can't see why you would want to deny another person their autonomy, their freedom, their right to have a say in the democratic system in which they live.
Okay.
Yeah, I gotta say, Vivian's the only one that's been consistent here.
Yeah.
Like her argument's totally consistent.
Yeah.
God damn.
Yeah, she's.
Now, can I? But I think we're getting around the core issue here, right? In which Vivian thinks democracy for democracy's sake is good. Democracy is always good, apparently, right? It seems like you guys disagree with that. I disagree with that. Sometimes democracy is a bad thing. Sometimes democracy should be restricted. Vivian wants total democracy, right? So maybe we should focus on that.
Possible, anyway.
Yeah. So maybe we should focus on that and not whether or not like apes can vote, right? I feel like that's.
I think if you're subject to a law, right, you should have the right to have a say in that law. I don't see how that's
line of thinking.
Let the monkeys vote.
Because children are not subject to the law the same way adults are. And we
They're still
recognize that
subject to
there's
the law.
a difference. So, for example, if you vote, I believe this is true. Hopefully, it's not a 21 thing. Maybe I'm wrong. But you can be called to jury duty, for example. So, would you keep that? Could a 5-year-old be called to jury duty in your system here? Should they be expected to sit on the jury? Should they be expected to be drafted and serve in the war? If that comes up, or register for the draft, should they be expected to fulfill all these same responsibilities that an adult human is expected to fulfill? I would hope that your answer would be no. Obviously,
of course my answer would be no, because this is another silly straw man.
So again, it's not a straw man. I'm asking a question.
This is not a logical extension. This is not a logical extension of my position.
The foolishness of your position.
Oh my god. More ad homs. Okay, this is not a logical extension of my position.
When I call you an
You're ad homing us by saying we're not being logical.
Okay. Look, this is not a logical extension of my position, right? Everybody is subject to laws in different ways than other people, right? Depending on what industry you work in, you may be subject to different laws than other people, okay? Nobody is subject to all the laws of the nation, depending on like what they're doing, right? Or who they are, or where they are, etc. Like,
But we also recognize that we don't hold children to the same standard of the law as we do adults, because the competency issue.
We also don't hold police officers to the. We don't also don't hold police officers to the same standard, or people who
Mug,
work
I
for
can't
public
hear you.
health
Your
to the
mic.
same
Where's your
standard.
mic?
Yeah, I don't have mine now. Like, but like, wait, that's actually false because like it's actually a legal problem. It's happening more and more often. Children like 16 and 17 are being tried as adults, and that's becoming more and more common. So like when you cite this,
It's probably not going to happen to an 8-year-old though. I
When
think
you talk
that's
about a 5-year-old or a
kids
3-year-old or a 7-year-old, that's obviously not true.
Okay, well, Wick, what you're saying is not true. They are subject to the law the same way everyone else is. They're just subject to different laws that are meant specifically for them, right? For example, maybe the law says that to be summoned to jury duty, you need to be 18 years old, whatever it is. So children aren't required because they're not 18, right?
Married people.
Maybe it says that if
you unmarried people,
if you break the law and you're 5 years old, you get tried this way. If you break the law and you're 50 years old, you get tried this way. They're still subject to the laws. They're just different laws.
Prime, this is America, bro. What did Childish Gambino say? This is America. This is America, dog. Let the babies vote. Let the babies hold guns. Let the as long as they.
It's just gonna be another long rant.
No, Vivian, this is what came out your mouth.
You're gonna make a point.
No, I'm
That isn't
quoting
what
you.
she said.
I'm quoting.
Are you gonna make a point?
No, Dooby. That's exactly what she said. She said
make a
as
point,
long as they are able to understand what's going on and they're able to press the buttons or fill out the ballot, even with help of another personhood, that's they should be allowed
Another
to do
personhood.
so. Yes.
But can a baby? But then oh,
That's
okay.
what she
I didn't
said,
see that
Dooby.
coming. But okay, Viv, you got a 10-minute mute. Okay.
Yes.
But hold on. But hold on. I'm gonna try to make an argument for you, for her. Okay, Viv. So Viv, I'm gonna try to do a good job for you. If I don't, I do apologize. All right. So
Don't do this, Prime.
Oh my God, dude! Look. All right, look. Viv has been sick. As you just have this skill with just driving people insane. I don't know how you are, right? Like you need to be studied by scientists. I don't know what you mean. But okay, look. All right, look. Viv, like, so you're saying like let the babies have guns. Well, look, if you actually follow what you just said, that Viv said, right, about having the ability, well then babies don't have the ability to shoot a gun. Right? They don't have the ability to aim a gun. They don't have the ability to pull the finger strength to pull the trigger, right? Like they don't have to do these things, right? So there's that, right? Until they're like toddlers, right? And then at least they can, shoot their moms in the back of the head, which happens.
Can I?
Let me just try to get this out, and Dewey, I want to go to you too. But like the point is like it's can you understand, right? And I don't think that's actually unreasonable, right, to say that if you can, and not just read letters, right? Because when you start beginning to learn at age 5, like that's when you start teaching people or 4 or 5, right, about letters, right? But that's not enough, right? You can recognize letters, that's not enough. And then from 5 to 8, you are learning the how to read. For those 3 years, you are learning how to read. And then at 9 is when you are learning how to take information in that you are reading, right? So that you understand the process, right? You've gotten the basics of the English language down, and at 9 years old, you are actually taking in information. So if I understand Vivian's point correctly, and hopefully I do, right? She's saying that people at that stage, right, who can actually take in information, maybe they should be able to vote. And if you want to, maybe you would take this a bit further down, right? Because you want to. I would say, no, maybe this is not Vivian talking, this is me, but maybe a little bit older than that, just a little bit, right? Because you want them to understand at least something about the political process, and that most kids don't, right? And we don't teach them that much. So maybe I would say somewhere in middle school, right? Like 11, 12, 13. I'm not putting words in Vivian's mouth. That's my opinion. But like she's talking about having comprehension of what's happening. Babies don't have comprehension, so that's why we don't give them guns, right? So they have no comprehension whatsoever. Does that
But
make
out of your own mouth came out, you said people don't know how the government works, even within our own education. They come out of school not understanding the education,
and we should teach them
the government system.
So,
We do teach
advocating for a test, or aren't you?
Stop, no,
Make up your fucking mind.
Smug, get out of here. Smug. You are
Doobie. Oh.
1 second, Azzy, you're criticizing Viv, talking, oh, well, what are you trying to do? You're trying to implement these competency tests? And then next you're on this other fucking side, well, we should judge.
I never said competency. I said it was, I never said competency. No, I never said that. Whick said that. I said it doesn't make sense.
I want to hear Dooby's. I want to hear Dooby's dulcet voice. Okay, so please, Dooby, go. I don't know what dulcet means. Actually, I should look that up. But go ahead.
It's okay. Okay, so I actually totally disagree with Vivian, obviously, but I do think her argument is consistent, and I think it's really annoying that she's muted right now, because I think there's a major problem there's many problems, but there's a major problem that just came up in my head that I wasn't going to mention, but I'm actually very curious as to like what Smug would say. So the reason children are currently not able to vote, right, isn't because we want to impress them or because we're obsessed with hierarchy. It's because we recognize that physically, like developmentally, they're not able to make certain decisions, right? For example, voting, right, big one, but also entering into contracts, consenting to surgeries, consenting to buy or sell property, right? They're just developmentally not able to do these things. If you're saying that the standard for them voting and then owning weapons even is just the ability to understand what it means to own a weapon and understand whatever, like
with help. With help?
Okay, but what does that say about the other things that we're saying that kids can't do, right? Entering into contracts, surgery, sexual consent. Right, all these things are things that we say that kids cannot do currently legally because they don't have the physical, mental ability to do it. Right, so I think there's a major problem here when you start saying that all that the requirement is that they need to understand. What does it mean to understand what it means to own a gun or fire a gun or purchase property or to vote on policy or to consent to sex? Right, I think you're going to run into a major fucking issue if that's the lane you're going down. Secondly, I don't think you guys are really attacking the core of her position, which is that democracy is good for its own sake. That if you're subject to laws, you should be able to impact them and affect the way that they're enforced, or whatever, and to vote on what those laws are. I think we're going in circles about the fucking voting test thing.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. Absolutely right, Dooby. Dooby, you hit the nail on the head, right? He's really honing in on this, right? And also, just a side note, I know what dulcet means now. I looked it up. Pleasant to the ear, melodious. He's got a pleasant voice, right?
Thank you.
Says just the most garbage things come out of it. Well, but anyway, but yeah. So what Viv was talking about, yeah, she's talking about expanding the franchise, right? Because she's saying that democracy is inherently good. More democracy is better, right? And she would probably say smaller democracy, being an anarchist and wanting to shrink government. I hope I'm not putting false words in your mouth, Vivian, right? Dooby here is trying to tackle that, saying like, is that actually the case, right? Is giving more? Are you actually more free if you have more democracy, right? So if you,
I'll address this directly if you don't mind.
Yeah. So I'll say this one last thing, then I'll throw straight to you. Like if you give the power to vote for people who don't quite understand their voting, right? Are they more free? Or maybe they're being used by someone else, like coerced by someone else, like to use their vote in the way they wish, right? Is is that choice more daunting for them, right? Like if you gave a 9-year-old the right to vote, and then you let them understand like how serious voting was, right? Like putting that kid in the voting booth and it's like, I'm nervous, like what if I make a wrong mistake, like a wrong choice, what'll happen? What if the other guy wins, right? And then people start saying or the person they vote for wins, like they voted for Trump, right? And then they hear bad things and like, well, I voted for that person. Am I a bad person too? Did I do something wrong? Like, I think these are honest like questions to have about this. Is that kid more free, right? Did democratize?
Can I because I was going to give 2 examples about the voting thing, if that's okay. Just
Okay,
really quickly.
and then we'll go to Whick. Sure.
Yeah. So the first example, just a case in which people voted on something, and I think the result was demonstrably bad. So we had to circumvent that democracy to make the good thing happen, which was 13 years ago, I think it was, in California, when the state voted to ban gay marriage, the most fucking progressive state in the country, voted to make it illegal for gay people to marry, and the courts had to get around that, and they overturned that, right? And I think that was a good thing. This is a case in which democracy came up with a bad result. There's another really, I think this is from the Republic, I think by Plato, or whatever. He gives the example of someone selling sweetbreads, right, to a village, right, and saying, hey, here, have some sweetbreads, vote for me in exchange for the sweetbreads. Basically, here are all these good things, everything's great. Here, have some food. Versus the and he's just like full of shit, right? He's like a Trump, just totally full of shit. Versus the well-educated guy who comes in, tells everybody what the problems are. It's very dry. It doesn't sound nice because they don't want to hear what the problems are because the problems are scary, right? So instead, they vote for the guy that's giving them food and telling them everything's great, right? So does that decision make them more free if people are choosing democratically to do bad things, right, on bad policy that hurts them in the long run? Does that make them more free? Is that a more good thing? Like, why is that the case?
So Whick, go ahead, and then in a minute, I'm gonna unmute Viv. Go ahead, please.
I'll try to get it as much as I can in this minute because I won't be able to afterwards. Okay, so the 4 most important words in the English language are up to a point. So we all know that water is good. It's good to stay hydrated, but we recognize that too much water can kill you. And so when we talk about democracy, there are reasonable limits we can place on this because we recognize that if we allow voting on everything by everyone, that bad actions can come. Like, I think we discussed this before. If we left it up to democracy to decide just purely straight without any restrictions, after 9/11, the Middle East would not exist anymore. It just wouldn't be there. We would have voted to glass that. It just would have been gone. Dooby brings up another good example with the 13 years ago with the restriction on people's rights, and we allow peoples to vote on others' rights. Obviously, there are reasonable restrictions we can put on democracy. No one is saying that. Now, the question is, what limits? Where do we draw the line? I think we have reasonable discussion on that. Again, if we allow, and he brought up another point, if we allow children this right to vote, then a whole host of other things come into play. There's a reason we don't allow children to make certain decisions, nor do we allow them to make choices in certain spheres, because again, we recognize, as Dooby has said, that they are not fully cognitively developed, and so they are incapable of making these decisions. Kids can't consent. They can't consent to a sexual relationship. That's a big one, and we know that's true, and we restrict the age at which you can legally do so, and that is a good thing. And this should also apply to voting. Again, because voting is a right and is a privilege, and it comes with certain responsibilities, I feel, as well, or it should, such as being able to sit on a jury and to be able to participate in the democracy in which you are voting for. And obviously, we could have arguments, we can have reasonable discussions about, again, should we lower it to 16? I don't know. I don't have a real opinion on that. But to opening it up just without any restriction to age, I think is foolish, unwise, and it's just going to lead to bad outcomes.
Okay, Vivian, go ahead, and then we'll go to Smugpug, and then Azzy.
Well, I mean, all I've heard is like, I don't like democracy bad. It kind of sucks, really. I thought the vast majority of people on this panel were like big fans of democracy, but I guess those 4 important words, like up to a point. And all I'm asking for here is some fucking consistency, okay? Because my proposal, right, is that democracy is the default, a default right given to all people who are subject to the laws of a nation, right? That they should have a say. They should have a say in it, and any restrictions that we place on that right, need to have good justifications behind them, and those justifications need to be consistent. So, like, when you say, for example, that a child isn't able to understand what they're doing when they vote, right? Like, this could be said to be true of so many people in the United States that have little to no fucking understanding of the political system in which they live or the candidates that they're voting for, and are just voting for whoever their mum, their dad, their friends, whatever, right? Whoever Tucker Carlson told them to vote for on Fox News, right? Like, so I'm asking for some fucking consistency from your side, I suppose, because I've been incredibly consistent.
I suppose
Don't
that
respond.
foolish consistency is a hobgoblin of little minds. That I mean, just because your position
Okay,
is
well, if you want to be
does not make it
inconsistent, that's fine.
correct.
It was a
It
trap,
just doesn't.
Wick. It was a trap.
I love how you talk,
Holy-
Wick. I can't believe you used that hobgoblin little minds. I love that.
It's a quote. It's not me. I think it was Ralph Waldo Emerson, but I'm not
Oh,
sure.
well, yeah. Oh no, but no, it's so different. That quote is a little different though. But okay, I thought so. Anyway,
I'm not saying
so
my
do you think-
consistency makes me right. I'm saying that your inconsistency means that you don't actually hold the positions that you say you hold. There are clearly some other reasons that you think children shouldn't be able to vote, other than their competency, other than their ability to understand what's going on, because you wouldn't restrict this from other people who also don't have the understanding. So their
The
childhood
reason
seems
why
to
we
be the
can't
principal
restrict it from
difference.
these
here.
other people who would have understanding, because using understanding as the level, as I said before, leads to bad outcomes. We'd have to have tests for it, and that's not a good thing. So when we do it and we restrict it by an age, what we do is we circumvent that problem. We circumvent that issue, and we say at this age we can reasonably expect that most people are at least capable or potentially capable of understanding and making their own decisions and things like that. And we as a
So
society
how do you define
agree
the
on this.
age?
Well,
Can I ask a
again,
question?
that's the question, right? And so again,
Through
the
competency.
reason that the American system does it at 18 is because 18, again, the argument is that if you could be drafted, then you should have the right to participate in the democratic system. And
I mean, if
that
that's your
is a
argument, that's
big
fine. You have
issue.
a consistent standard, right? You're like, if you can go and fight in war, then you should have the vote, and that is the standard by which I determine who should have a vote. But I would say that you probably don't actually agree with that, because you're not going to say, for example, that somebody who's disabled and could never go to war, right, is not going to be able to vote. So obviously, it's not them going to war that gives them the right to vote.
Can I ask you a question? So, Vivian, do you think that children who understand, quote unquote, understand the consequences of a surgery should be able to consent to surgery?
Yeah, I think like over here in the UK, we have something called Gillick competence, right? And I think it's the same in a lot of Western nations, where you give a certain amount of agency to the child on certain medical procedures.
So you think like a 10-year-old, if they can describe or lay out the consequences for like a kidney donation, should be able to sign off the kidney to somebody? Like, really?
I don't know. I don't know exactly how they measure competence in this area, and like
Okay,
whether
well,
or not
that's
it's
fine.
reasonable. So I couldn't. Yeah,
That's
I
fine.
literally can't
So-
even answer that question.
That's-
I think
yeah,
if
it's
the
okay.
child
So
can be
I'll go
found
to something
competent
more,
and then sure.
So I'll go to something more, I guess, that everybody here, I think, would probably have like a firm grasp of. So do you think that if a child can say that they understand, describe the consequences for like sex, do you think they should be able to consent to sex? If they say they fully
think-
understand and fill out a test saying, I understand what consent means and what sexual activity is, they should be able to go off and have sex with an adult.
I think we generally don't punish children like particularly hard for having sex with other children. I think the problem comes
That's-
in with sex with an adult, where we recognize that there's a power imbalance there, right? A coercive relationship and pushing people into doing something.
Wait, so you're saying that the only reason children shouldn't be able to have sex with adults is because there's a power imbalance?
Yeah, I would say so.
Oh my god.
That's-
Oh,
Oh yeah,
what
it's
if-
a power imbalance
what-
that
what's the
allows the
power
child to be
imbalance?
abused. Don't oh
Let
my
me-
god, dog. It allows the child to be abused, right? That's
Wait, but
the
what's
whole
the
point of
power imbalance?
Sorry?
What's the power imbalance?
Well, we're
the
going
amount
for
of,
it
the amount
wrong.
of influence. Yeah, the amount of influence that adults have over children in our society.
Okay,
and the
so if there was like a
inability-
rich child,
and the inability for children to understand the consequences, blah blah blah.
So, but no,
okay,
that's
so
a contradiction.
please,
That's a
so
contradiction.
as you please. So if there was a rich child who came from a very wealthy family, 9 years
Mhm.
old or some shit, and they had like a janitor, right? That they, and again, this is a child who's very well educated, understands consent and what sexual activity is. Given that this child has more influence, more say in society than this poor janitor, this child could consent to sex with the janitor?
It depends on their ability to consent, doesn't it? But like we set a law for like a
boy.
strict age in the nation because we generally understand that children can't consent and up until a certain age, and because power imbalances exist, blah blah blah. I don't think having sex is the same as voting, though.
But I don't think it's like a social power imbalance. I think it's typically the fact that their brain isn't fully developed and they literally cannot. They're not capable of grasping the consequences of this decision, right? They cannot legally make this decision because
And we make a kind of cut. We generally have a kind of cutoff period, right? Which adults decide actually, and I think kids should probably have a say in when that cutoff point is. They should
Wait,
have
you
a say
think
in the laws that govern
children?
their country.
You think
Yeah.
children should decide what the cutoff is for them having sex with adults?
Yeah, partially. I mean, obviously, the country as a whole should decide that.
Mask off. Mask off.
boy. That's
Mask off.
Oh boy.
What,
Oh
I'm
man.
just, I mean, it's just autonomy, isn't it?
Oh
like,
boy.
I don't think adults should be having sex with children because we recognize
What if the
strong
child consents?
coercive influences, the strong coercive influences, the potential for abuse, all of that sort of shit. I'm not saying
but
what if the child
consents?
I don't
You
think
are
the
saying
child can. I don't think the child can consent in most situations.
You just told her in most situations. So in some situations, you think a child can consent to sex with an adult.
In some rare ass fucking situations where the kid's like 15 and the adult's like 17, like maybe, but we generally put a fucking line there to protect children from this. All right, you're not gonna push me into this dipshit fucking.
You've already gone there.
You're in the
I haven't.
You're very deep in the shit right now.
Own it.
We've been trying to say this from jump, Vivian. You've been there, and you've been contradicting yourself from jump.
No.
I've
She
been
has
trying
been
to-
contradicting
whose turn is
herself.
it?
But no.
She has.
It's Smug Pug's turn. He's been waiting quite patiently. But yeah, Viv, you've already.
It's a shit analogy, though.
Oh,
like
boy.
this is not the same thing as voting.
Smug.
You dive into the shit.
Smug.
The consequences, the potential for abuse, they're a different thing.
Yeah, like shit, Azzy, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Out of everybody here,
Shut up, Smug.
shut the fuck up, Azzy. I'm just gonna mute your ass if you keep. Bitch, shut the fuck up. No, like out of everyone on this panel this whole night, Viv has been the most consistent. Now, like, I agree with you guys. It's getting kind of cringy, and we're getting to the fucking kind of yikes zone. But like, yeah, there is consistency. To the point, Whick, for you. Like, yeah, there are limitations to certain things. Like, yeah, obviously, like free reign democracy can't have those negative aspects, which is why we implement laws, which we expect the Supreme Court to uphold. Like, generally speaking, with individuals' rights. But as Viv correctly stated, though, like literally, you and fucking Azzy are on this fucking gotcha for consistency checks, and you guys have been blatantly inconsistent on almost every fucking point you've made on this particular topic. Like, you're against competency checks, but then you advocate for fucking competency checks.
Okay.
Or you make these proposals that would require a competency check. So it's like,
I never talked
when
about
you get asked
competency.
how you figure this out, well, I don't know. You want to have girls vote. I don't know.
No, you did, Azzy. You talked about competency with regards to
No,
mentally
I
disabled.
know. I'm going to introduce a point. I'm going.
Why
No,
are you
Whick-
interrupting me, Azzy? Why are you interrupting me? You talked about competency with regards to people with like mental illness and so on. In fact, you even said that there are certain tests in schools that allowed people to determine this. So you did.
No, I
You
said we
argued-
already do those. That's what I
Okay,
said.
and you
Yeah,
think that's good?
Okay,
And you think
just,
that's
just
good?
moving past it. Like let's bring it back from the sex thing. That's okay. So let's bring it back a little bit.
I
We
mean,
can
it's different.
recognize
It's
it-
interpersonal
yeah, I
relationships.
understand it's different. I understand it's different. But let me kind of
Is
narrow
Smug
it
done?
down
Because I
here.
want to before you go
And
with
just real quick. We can understand that the consequences the potential consequences of certain votes, not all votes, obviously, but certain votes can be catastrophic, can be life-changing, can affect the lives of those voting in weird and wild ways. And so when you allow children
Viv is
to
muted,
make
but go
these
ahead.
decisions, oh,
Under this argument,
Go
Wick,
ahead. Keep going, Wick. Viv is muted.
under this argument, we should prevent old people from voting because they are making political decisions
again,
that are
no, because the reason you
Keep
can't
going,
do
Wick,
that,
and then we'll go to Dan.
okay, but just to address Smug's point, the reason you can't do that is because it would require tests, and tests are bad. So we can't do that. We can't allow that to happen. So again, we can recognize that kids can't make certain decisions because they are not cognitively able to understand the full ramifications of the decision they're making. And this isn't just sex. This is in contract law and other sorts of laws and things like that. And I would argue that this is the same with voting. And the same with voting is that they cannot make a reasonably be expected to make a decision on these things because they cannot reasonably be expected to understand the full ramifications. Whereas that can be a reasonable expectation of someone of a certain age, like say 16 or 18 or 21 or 14. I don't know what the age should be, but that's where we need.
If you're arguing from mental capacity, then if you're being consistent, you would argue that the voting age should be pushed back to 25. Like you cite going to war at 18. Well, 18 is a complete, like if you know enough about the voting age was set to 18, 18 is a completely fucking arbitrary number. Like literally,
sure. If they wanted to if they wanted to move the war age to 25.
Hold on, Wick. Because there's no actual reason why the government couldn't have just said, okay, we're gonna send like 14-year-olds to war. Like it was a completely arbitrary. You can fucking laugh, but I mean this is fucking history. Look it up. Like it was a completely arbitrary decision to make.
I thought there was no reasoning behind the decision at all. They didn't reason. They didn't have any sort of. They said we're just going to throw a number out there, and we decided on 18.
It was arbitrary to draft people at 18. Yes, it de facto was. Yes.
Okay. All right. So let's go to Dan. And Dan, quickly make it quick, please.
Yeah. One thing I have to say about Vivian is she is very principled to the stance with her democracy. I entirely was sticking to my stance, and I think there's my limitations to certain parts, like children. I think is a bit overdone. I do understand where her position is coming from in a lot of that part, but I haven't seen her just make a point of like having competency test. I think that's much different to the part she was talking about is much different than that. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay. Let's go to Azzy. You got seconds to do this.
Listen, the only thing I was bringing up is I didn't bring up competency. I was going to say the reason why we have ages like 18 or before 18, it was 21. The only reason it was changed to 18 is because of the Vietnam War. We allowed, and then in order to allow that, we had to change the Voting Act in order to allow them to fight in war. So yes, it was moved to 18 for not just some arbitrary reason. It was a very specific reason. So again, I don't think you're listening. The reason I'm saying this because we choose 18 because of maturity. It's not. I'm not advocating for competency. I'm talking. Our competency is just English language comprehension. And that's just why I said if we were just going off of competency, we can allow monkeys and birds and animals who are able to comprehend what we're saying. No, I'm advocating for maturity. Maturity is socio-emotional, and I would think maybe Dooby might agree with this. This is why he's asking questions about how allowing them to choose to have sex. There's a level of critical thinking. There's a level of maturity that with time as you experience more, as you grow, as you're taught, you would adapt, you mature, you allow that socio-emotional, it's like an emotional intelligence to grow. You allow that critical thinking skill to grow, and you do not have that at the age of 5. So allowing them to vote, which is a very critical process in the way our fabric of society runs, when they don't have the ability to critically think or have those make those social emotional decisions for themselves, because they can't at that age have any type of onus of what's going to happen in the future, because they just been alive for 5 years. I wouldn't want them to vote. If anything, if we're going to remove, and that's what I'm saying, it's inconsistent. If she's saying, oh, she's against A power dynamic. So the only reason we do this is because of power dynamics, and she has she's full autonomy. She has this thing against power dynamics, but she's for guardianship. She clearly said by allowing kids to vote with help is guardianship. Amanda brought this up. Dooby brought this up when he talked. Oh, matter of fact, no, I think no, it was Amanda who brought it up, that when guardianship is allowing full age adults who are of maturity, of critical thinking, of competency, who help individuals who don't have those full agency over any of that. That's why there's a power dynamic in guardianship. So if she's saying she has a problem with that, but she's still allowing kids to vote with help, she doesn't really have a problem with guardianship. She doesn't have a problem with power dynamics.
Okay, great.
So there's the inconsistency.
Okay.